Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching NDTV. Bringing back memories of the abrogation of Article 370 that set into process changes in the political landscape of Jammu and Kashmir, the Lok Sabha on Wednesday, the third day of the winter session, passed the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Amendment Bill, following which the opposition members walked out of the House. Now, during the discussion, Home Minister Amit Shah had said that one seat in the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly is to be reserved for those displaced from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Earlier, he also said that two bills will bring justice to those who have been deprived of their rights for the past 70 years. He also said that one of the bills will also nominate two people from the Kashmiri migrant community to the assembly. These are communities who have been facing the brunt of terrorism for years in the valley but have been living on the margins. That's what he said. But while doing so, he also talked about Nehruvian blunders, taking the past about Jawaharlal Nehru's handling of the valley, its issues, even as the opposition questioned how could the assembly be expanded when there have been no assembly elections in J&K for past 9 years. Kashmir for years has been an important part of the BJP's ideological and political universe, which is why these key bills that the government wants to bring about that provide for the reservation of Kashmiri Pandits, SCs and STs in the J&K assembly are significant. We will discuss all that today, but first, let's take a look at what the Home Minister said.
मैं जो बिल लेकर आया हूं, जो विधेयक लेकर इस महान सदन की सहमति प्राप्त करने के लिए मैं खड़ा हुआ हूं, वो बिल 70 सालों से जिन्हों को अन्याय हुआ है, जो अपमानित हुए और जिनकी अनदेखी की गई है, वो सभी लोगों को न्याय दिलाने का बिल है, उनको अधिकार दिलाने का। माननीय अध्यक्ष जी, ये बिल किसी भी समाज में जो डिप्राइव लोग होते हैं उनको आगे बढ़ाना चाहिए। ये भारतीय संविधान की मूल भावना है, परंतु उसके साथ साथ इसका सम्मान न कम हो, इस तरह से आगे बढ़ाना चाहिए। अधिकार देना और अधिकार सम्मान के साथ देना, दोनों में बड़ा फर्क है। इसलिए कमजोर और वंचित वर्ग के जगह अन्य पिछड़ा वर्ग, ये नामकरण बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। नेहरू के समय में जो ब्लंडर हुआ था, इसके कारण कश्मीर को भुगतना पड़ा। मैं मान्यवर इस सदन में खड़ा रहकर आपके आसन के सामने जिम्मेदारी के साथ कहता हूं कि दो बड़ी गलतियां जो पंडित जवाहरलाल नेहरू के प्रधानमंत्री काल में हुई, उनके लिए गए निर्णयों से हुई। इसके कारण सालों तक कश्मीर ने सहन करना पड़ा। एक सबसे बड़ी गलती, जब हमारी सेना जीत रही थी, पंजाब का एरिया आते ही सीज फायर कर दिया गया और पाक ऑक्यूपाई कश्मीर का जन्म हुआ। अगर सीज फायर 3 दिन लेट होता तो पाक ऑक्यूपाई कश्मीर आज भारत का हिस्सा। मान्यवर, एक ही गलती बताने से इतना तिल मिला गया।
नहीं, मैंने हटा दिया।
मैं तो सिर्फ नहीं, ऐसा नहीं है। मैं सिर्फ दो ही बताना चाहता हूं। एक, पूरा कश्मीर जीते बगैर सीज फायर कर लिया, और दूसरा, यूएन के अंदर हमारे मसले को ले जाने की बहुत बड़ी गलती की।
We have Professor Amitabh Mattoo, author and Professor Jawaharlal Nehru University, former advisor to Chief Minister and Chair Jammu and Kashmir Knowledge Initiative, joining us. Thank you, Professor Mattoo, for joining us. We've been tracking J&K and politics for so long. So the government today has moved the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganisation Amendment Bill and other key bills pertaining to J&K. What I understand is that the bill reserves 2 seats for Kashmiri migrants and for people displaced from Pakistani-held territories of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, clearly, the Home Minister has also said that this is justice after 70 years for ethnic communities. How do you see this, sir, particularly because it comes after the abrogation of Article 370 and also after the delimitation process? Yes.
Yeah, I think you need to separate the 2019 J&K Reorganization Act, which abrogated 370, from this, although it's an amendment to that act, this bill which has been introduced into the Lok Sabha, because it does provide some progressive legislation, which I think is important to recognize. The Anglo-Indian community, for instance, in the Indian Parliament has been or given 2 seats which are nominated by the president. Similarly, in this bill, it says that 2 members of the migrant community, without specifying any religion, region, those who had to move out of Kashmir because of violence and terrorism and disturbance, and who were registered, or even those who were not registered but stayed there because of government service, or but still having movable property there, 2 people should be nominated, and those will be nominated by the governor, lieutenant governor in this case at the moment, and one of them should be a woman. Frankly, I don't see anything wrong. I think it incentivizes Kashmiri Pandits' involvement within the mainstream of politics in Jammu and Kashmir. It helps create the channels for a dialogue between Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims. Of course, as I said, it doesn't specify that the migrant nominated will be Kashmiri Pandits. So I think it's a progressive legislation which I support entirely.
Right.
The second is reservation for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. There were no reservations for scheduled tribes in the Act of 2019, and now you have 9 seats reserved for scheduled tribes like Gujars and Bakarwals, and 7 seats for scheduled castes. Finally, of course, there is the legislation which reserves 1 seat for all those who have had to leave Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Right. Through various phases from 47 to 71 because of either being forced out or facing threats and violence. So this legislation per se, I would not have any dispute, or I wouldn't think that it's a very controversial legislation. What, of course, is the expectation is that there will be elections,
yes,
and that eventually, as the Home Minister has assured the Parliament, that there will be a statehood given back to Jammu and Kashmir.
Right. Professor Mattoo, I'll just come to the election bit, but clearly when you look at the other key bill on STs, it includes the Pahadi community and a handful of tribes in Jammu Kashmir's list of scheduled tribes. Now, Pahadis will now be able to contest reserved seats, which were previously, I understand, dominated by other tribes. So there's another bill that looks at inclusion of the Valmiki community. So, and another one that looks at, of course, the change in nomenclature, calling other backward classes, and this is something the Home Minister addressed today. So, what kind of electoral and socio-political impact are you looking at given this bill in context?
See, I mean, there are obviously accusations as whenever there is a reorganization of electoral constituencies and reservations that there is gerrymandering happening, and that you are actually fiddling with constitutions in a way that would suit the powers that be. But as I said, once you took a decision that Pahadis would be also part of scheduled tribes on the basis of really linguistic distinctions, then there is a significant number of Gujars and Bakarwals and who have been demanding rights. And I think the seats reserved, which is 9, is in proportion to their total population within the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Similarly, SC seats, 7 seats, it anticipates that there would be, I would imagine, other communities which would be accorded that status, but includes the present number of scheduled castes who are already accorded that status. And 1 seat nominated for those who have been displaced from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is not really going to change the fortunes of this assembly. As I said, what most people hope is that this anticipates elections and finally statehood.
Right.
Within that, you can incentivize participation, you can incentivize dialogue, or you can incentivize perhaps communities that you feel will support you. But ultimately, these things in the short term, you might think that these communities will side by you, but elections and politics in India and democracy in India has its own logic.
Right.
And there is a self-generating momentum in terms of debate, dissent, and who represents whom in the ultimate analysis.
Right. Professor Mattoo, my last question to you. Today the Home Minister spoke about cinema theatres in the valley. He also said that this is the only region with 2 aims in India. So clearly there was a lot of focus on development, and I understand the government is doing a lot. But when you look at possibilities of elections, do you think that Jammu Kashmir is ready to host elections?
See, you can't make the argument that everything is normal and cinemas, there are people going to cinemas, there are tourists traffic, the footfall of tourists in all parts of the state has increased. You held showcase events like the G20 tourism ministers meeting in Kashmir, and then say there's still problems in holding elections. That doesn't hold water. So I hope that when the Home Minister suggested, as he did, that the development agenda is the centerpiece and there are things which are moving towards an accelerated phase of normalcy and development, he also is going to now announce elections. Hopefully, when the general elections in the rest of the country are announced, both parliamentary and state elections are held in Jammu and Kashmir. Ultimately, Jammu and Kashmir is beyond partisan politics. There are only 6 members of parliament, and the stakes, electoral stakes of national parties in Jammu and Kashmir are really very few directly. Of course, it does have a multiplier impact in other ways. So I think it's important now to reassure the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and it's not just people in the valley, but also in Jammu who want representation. After all, the greatness of India is celebrating diversity and democracy, and why should Jammu and Kashmir be denied that after 4 years after the reorganization happened? It's time that there are elections, and I fully support the progressive legislation for reservation of seats of Kashmiri migrants. And it does not, people might say this is a self-serving argument that I am a Kashmiri Pandit. It nowhere specifies any religion whatsoever. It just talks about people who have had to leave their home and hearths because of violence and terrorism within the valley.
Right. Thank you, Professor Mattoo, for joining us and helping us understand the implications of the amendments that have been moved today. Thank you very much. We also have Ranbeer Singh Pathania, former MLA and spokesperson of the BJP, Hasnain Masoodi, MP, who comes from National Conference, and of course, former judge of the High Court of Jammu and Kashmir. And we also have Amit, Raina, spokesperson, roots in Kashmir and also representing the Kashmiri Pandit community. I'd like to go to Mr. Raina first. Mr. Raina, today the Home Minister spoke extensively about the exodus that remains, an episode of shame in this country because there's so much that Kashmiri Pandit community has gone through with the violence. He said that today's amendments will ensure that the community has a voice in the assembly so that something like this never happens in future. How do you see this move, sir?
We welcome the move. We welcome the reservation of 2 seats for displaced community. One needs to understand that Jammu and Kashmir is a unique state. It has almost 2.5 million people who are displaced within their own country. So you have around 2 million people who come from the POJK displaced community, and then the significant portion of Kashmiri Pandit community. And for 70 years, both the communities, because owing to their minuscule nature, owing to the politics the way Jammu and Kashmir has, had been derived and denied their political voice. So the step that has been taken today with the passing of the bill at Lok Sabha probably is the first step towards giving the voice to the weak of Jammu and Kashmir, to the oppressed of Jammu and Kashmir, to the persecuted of Jammu and Kashmir. And I'm sure that this will further lead to the rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pandits back in the valley, in their own homeland, in the one-place settlement they are seeking for. So it is definitely a very welcome move. A voice to the persecuted was much needed.
Right. Mr. Pathania, is this a step to further the mainstreaming of Kashmir, something that your party has been talking about? But clearly the opposition has also questioned not just the targeted killings, which of course the Home Minister also addressed, but also has talked about the need for something like this. What would be your comments to that, sir?
Vasudha, this is the considered stand of Bharatiya Janata Party and earlier Bharatiya Janasangh, ek vidhan, ek pradhan, ek nishan. And virtually this was the red herring which was waved by none other than the erstwhile and the lost ruler of Jammu and Kashmir, Maharaja Hari Singh. He warned the country of India. Jammu and Kashmir was not part of India. He warned India not to be complacent. The arrangement, the system, the practices and precedents which were available in the entire country, they should be made available to the Jammu and Kashmir. But as Amit Shah ji said today, Nehru ji and Congress erred. They erred, first of all, in reclaiming the entire Jammu and Kashmir, and ultimately this led to the creation of Pak-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This led to the China-Pak economic corridor and that triangle project of China. So ultimately, the Jammu and Kashmir, it Jammu and Kashmir it witnessed trials, it witnessed tribulation, it witnessed bloodshed, it witnessed terrorism, it witnessed unemployment, and it witnessed political adventures and misadventures also. An article which not, I'll not talk about the Constitutional Assembly, even Congress was not unanimous on it, Article 370, but Nehruji pushed it through with the help of Mr. Gopalaswamy Iyengar in order to please, in order just to appease Sheikh Abdullah. And you see, the article was passed in 1950, and another 2 years later, Sheikh Abdullah had to be imprisoned. That means that Nehruji himself felt the heat of the article. And another article, Article 35A, this was inserted into Constitution, and the article never saw the face of the Indian Parliament also. So, first of all, the concept of Ek Vidhan, Ek Pradhan, Ek Nishan has been conceptualized. And with regard to the today's amendments, Kashmiri Pandits, a community which has seen a worst Holocaust, exiled from their own homeland, their pain, their anguish has ultimately been felt, and an attempt has been made to make them politically visible in the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly. The same is the case with Pak-occupied Jammu and Kashmir refugees. They came in 1948, they came in 1965, they came in 1975. And these were those people who rejected the two-nation theory of Jinnah and virtually East India Company's gospel also. And till now, they had not a right to vote, right to educational institutions, right to government job also. Now, their voices shall be felt. We think a more comprehensive, representation of Jammu and Kashmir in the Assembly. This is a welcome step. Everybody is all praised for the move of the Sarkar.
We have Mr. Masoodi also joining us. He's an MP from the National Conference. Mr. Masoodi, you know, the Home Minister today talked about justice to people, from STs to SEs to even Pandits, and these are ethnic communities of J&K. How do you see this move, sir?
Ma'am, our objection to this, the effort to introduce and pass these two bills has been primarily on the ground that a law that is under judicial security is being used to move and get the two bills passed. See, our stand is that J&K Reorganization Act, whereby the state has been fragmented into two UTs, is assailed, and it is under judicial scrutiny before the top constitutional court of the country. The constitutional morality and constitutional propriety demands that a law that is under judicial scrutiny should not be implemented or should not be used to just make an amendment or to introduce a legislation. See, that was primarily our objection, because you know that even if when we approached the Supreme Court, we did ask for that the law be stayed, but the observation made by the Supreme Court was, since it is formally referred to the constitutional bench, so the court has all the power to undo whatever, if anything is done to implement the order that is under judicial scrutiny. That was the first objection. Second objection, you just please go to the first bill. First bill is Amendment to J&K Reservation Act 2004. You remember that, kindly recall that 5th August 2019 decisions were marketed on the mistruth that, there was no provision made for weaker sections, no provision made for backward segments of the society, and to empower these segments. But the very effort, today's bill belies the stand, belies the mistruth on which it was marketed, the 5th August 2019 decisions. Now here is a bill that has been enacted by the state legislature that provided for reservation to STs, SCs, weaker sections, ALC people who are actual line of control, and other segments, socially and educationally backward segments of the society. Now what does this bill achieve? This bill merely repacks whatever has been already done by the state legislature and now gives it a label of OBC. So that apart, the bill is being weighed. Why should Parliament use its power to amend a bill that has been passed by the state legislature? That is our objection. The bill is being passed by in exercise of powers under Reorganization Act that, as I earlier said, is under judicial scrutiny. Now let us go to the other bill. Other bill is again in exercise of the powers, by exercise of the powers under Reorganization Act that we said that is already pointed out is under judicial scrutiny, and should not be employed or should not be used to get an amendment made. Now, another objection is that the power is being given to the LG to make the nomination.
Mr. Pathania, would you like to respond to Mr. Masoodi's comment? Because
clearly, very simple one-liner, very simple one-liner. I fail to understand.
No, we also see the opposition raising the principle of equal representation, because if you see the Delimitation Commission report, clearly we know what 6 of the 7 new seats in Jammu. So there are some concerns that the opposition has raised. Would you like to respond to that? And of course, Mr. Masoodi's argument.
I'll respond to it, Vasudha, with regard to the various 2 objections which have been leveled by a learned legal luminary and who had been a High Court judge also. First of all, regarding provision of nomination to Kashmiri Pandit, I fail to understand what hatred, what rancor and what ill will you have towards. First of all, you sat like a Nero fiddling, and the worst exodus of a community from their homeland occurred. You were as good as a Nero. You played and you walked and strolled in the streets of London, your leader, Dr. Farooq Abdullah. And now you have the face of saying that objecting the nomination to the Legislative Assembly.
Okay, Mr. Raina, what about your comments, sir? I think, he's from the community. Let him also respond to this.
One line. Yes. Pak-occupied Jammu and Kashmir refugees also. They are also facing the brunt. No right to vote, no right to have immovable property, no right to have government service also. But they have been provided reservation, they have been provided the route of nomination. Why do they hate them? And secondly, with regard to the OBC, very, very specific one error on it.
Yes.
The term OBC is a constitutional term. The term OSC, which was prevalent in Jammu and Kashmir since the past 6 and 7 decades, it was not comprehensive.
So that's a constitutional validity which the Home Minister spoke about, right? To the classification. Yes, Mr. Raina. Yes, sir. So I'm running short of time. I wanted Mr. Raina to respond.
I am not surprised. I am not surprised with Mr. Masoodi having objections on displaced Kashmiri Pandits being nominated, POGK people nominated, because that is the party which has not even they did not nominate a single Kashmiri Pandit for elections in last 3 elections. At least from 2003 onwards, I do not remember a single Kashmiri Pandit being given ticket to contest elections. Their hatred for Kashmiri Pandits is well known. They acted a Nero, they acted blind when 1990 exodus was happening, ethnic cleansing was happening. Now coming back to the other part of it, the double standards of National Conference is that in one breath you say that the case is sub judice, there's a writ petition on the reorganization of the state and Article 370, and on the other breath you are out on the streets demanding elections. So if you are demanding elections for a Union territory.
Right, Mr. Raina, let me just get Mr. Masoodi to respond to that. And more than that, there's also this very important aspect of this development narrative that the government has presented and is working on. Mr. Masoodi, do you think that is something that has also struck a chord with the people of J&K?
See, ma'am, the normalcy narrative that is sought to be built up by referring to the number of tourists visiting the place and the less or no stone pelting incidents is not the true indicator of normalcy. The true indicator of normalcy is if you have courage to go for the elections. If you tell us that theatres are, cinema halls are now, people visit cinema halls and they are now operational or functional. But please tell us, let us know, and we waited for that announcement in the House, that why don't you go for the elections? I mean, we don't have any municipal elections now, ULBs are gone, we don't have state elections. So you deny the right to elect a government to 15 million people of Jammu and Kashmir. So how can you just build up and say there is a normalcy and build up a normalcy narrative on the basis of cultural events and sports events and some cinema halls being working? And second is that, let us assume for a while that you say that there are no stone pelting incidents, but you don't give other half of the story. You don't say what is the number of people who have been put behind bars under Public Safety Act. And we have now under trials who are detained, who are lodged in jails outside the state. What is the number of those under trials?
Okay, Mr. Masoodi, thank you so much for joining us. Also, Mr. Raina and Mr. Pathania for joining us. That was our panel on this big move that the government has brought about with the passing of the Reorganization Amendment Bill, which reserves seats for the SC/STs in J&K. That was all the time that we have for you in this bulletin. Keep watching NDTV for more news and updates.